Hey guys, welcome to the review for No More Black Magic by A.L. Kessler. I literally read this book over the past 2 days. It was a readathon weekend and I needed to feel like I got something done, so I picked this book because it's really short. I mean, it's not like novella short, though I don't really know what the word count is, but the book itself is pretty short, so you could definitely finish it in like a day or two depending on how fast you read. But since it's all fresh in my mind, I had to jump in and do this review, even though you won't see this probably until July. So before we jump into my review, let's look at the blurb on Goodreads. No More Black Magic is the first book in the Here Witchy series by A.L. Kessler. Explosions, body parts, and black magic are all part of Abby Collins' typical day. As the top paranormal investigation bureau agent, she only gets the best cases, but when the cult of Ra comes to play, she might be in over her head. Finding a murderer while up against a hex, an overprotective coven, and a stubborn werewolf reminds her that nothing in the paranormal world is easy. As the death toll rises and a decades-old crime linked to Abby is uncovered, disturbing information is brought to light. Abby must unlock an ancient language steeped in black magic to uncover the truth before the murderer comes for her. So I think that this blurb does an okay job of illustrating what goes on in the story. As far as, who the character is pretty accurate. And then it very vaguely obviously hints to what's going on with the murder, with the coven, and then the werewolf. But when you read it, the relationships aren't quite like what you'd expect. Now, there are 2 covers for this book. The first one here looks like it's the print version. This is the version that I know Cordy has in print, and we're gonna do our review pretty soon. I'll have a link to it if we've already done it. So I know that this version is in print, and this version is the Kindle version. Looks like it's also possibly also the print version now. I'm not entirely sure. But when you look at it on Kindle as the box sets, this is the cover that shows up as well. This is the cover that I saw because I got the Kindle version. And immediately my expectations dropped because this is not my typical genre. And I think because of the way that it is set up, like many other Kindle covers, you have the pretty girl on the front with the magic, and this being more of the paranormal witchy series, that black, blue, and purple color theme. I have seen it a lot. Now, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just not the genre that I read, but I have an idea of what to expect. I'm actually listening to this book, which is totally unrelated, but I got it free on Kindle, and it has the same color theme, the sort of, girl on the cover with the little bit of magic and what's going on. So it is definitely directed to a particular audience. Because of that, when I saw it, my expectations was, this is gonna be really just like a paranormal romance, pretty standard magic stuff going on. And I didn't quite read the blurb, as I usually do beforehand, so I didn't know we were the character was older and actually working. I was just like, they're typically in high school and she's gonna be a witch and she's gonna fall in love with a werewolf and yada yada. So the typical theme that happens with these stories. That being said, I was wrong. I was at least wrong with the setting. Obviously from the description, we know that she is a member of the Paranormal Investigation Bureau, so she is an adult. She's 24, working on these cases. Even though it keeps saying that she's the best, we don't get to see any other agents working around her to really know who else or how many other agents there are. Is she the only one in the area and that's why she's the best, or is she the best, because they do make a comment later she's the best in the nation, and I'm like, back it up. There is a bit of the MC being great trope going on that thankfully isn't hitting us over the head as much. When we're introduced to her, she's called onto a crime scene. When she takes the phone call, it's kind of that attitude of devil may care, but she's gonna go do her job and she cares about her job, but she's not necessarily like excited and happy to do it. It's more of the serious, grungy kind of personality. No friends kind of a thing. We come up on the murder scene and it's pretty gruesome. So the hex situation actually comes into play really quickly. And a lot of the story element plots do happen very quick. The pacing is very, very, very fast. Not so much that it's too fast and it just like skims over things without explaining, because I do think the author did a fantastic job of giving us just enough information in relevant points of the story to keep that pace moving quickly. Looking at it from an editing point of view, where I was like, that's a lot going on right now. These are a lot of characters and people and strings tying in, because we have the murder plot, we have the whole covens and other witches out there, we've got the werewolves, we've got the person who raised her, which is actually a vampire, and like his life. All of that in such a short book, and it being the first book, did get to the point of like, well, if all this is going on, what's going to happen? Like, how are you continuing this series? That's kind of where my thoughts went. Thankfully, as far as the plot is concerned, it's pretty much following the murder is the real core plot of this book and everything connected to that murder. While it does branch out, we do solve it. It is nice and wrapped up in this first book, but we still have the other lines to continue the story through the series. So we are getting episodic events, but you can clearly see the weaving that's going to be throughout the series. Plenty of stuff to get you interested to keep reading. I do want to keep reading this series, and I'm going to talk about that because it comes a bit into the writing a little later, but I think this might be one of the indie series that I try to read in total and review for you guys just to see how it developed over time. I have not read enough in this genre to say if it's a totally unique idea or not for the main character to be like investigating but also a witch and have these issues. But for me, it was very refreshing, and I appreciated that while the story and everything was fast-paced, the character relations were much more slower and built up, and I really look at those to decide if I like a series or not. Unlike most, I guess, adult paranormals, there was really it was a low-key level of romance in here. Nothing was, I guess, pursued, especially nothing explicit, which was great. But it did have the trope of everybody wanting to date the main character, and it was kind of weird the way it was worded too, because it wasn't like, sometimes they did ask her directly out on a date, and sometimes she would think of contacting a character to meet for information or like get a coffee, and she's like, well, I hope he doesn't think this is a date. And I'm like, for someone who's like lived on their own and likes it that way and does it for a reason, you bring up dating a lot. And also, there was no like sexual content in this book, but there were certain interactions with a character in particular, which you can kind of tell is going to be maybe the main love interest, and where they're like hanging out and they're building up their friendship. And she's like, it was nothing sexual. We were just hanging out on the couch. And I'm like, I don't feel like you need to specify that. You probably could have taken that line out and just said we hung out on the couch and watched some stupid TV. There was times of, I don't know if you want to call it author commentary or character commentary. I guess we only were on the MC, so it would be that Abby's comment that I was like, you didn't need to say that, but now that you've said it, it was kind of like a too much information thing. As far as the other characters, pretty much all of the male characters were described as attractive. Her guardian, the semi-love interest, old boy from next door kind of character. So there wasn't a lot of variance in what the characters really looked like, but it seems like we might have some different personalities, which is really helpful, especially between the two that she is closest with, the vampire that raised her and then the werewolf that she works with for a bit. That was really great, but having like everybody looks good kind of thing was a little bit unrealistic, but I had expected it. That's something that I do expect when I read this genre, is the whole like that sort of fantasy side of everybody looks good. And then my last note as far as characters go is main character has taken this job and does what she does best as a way of claiming her independence. Even with being a hired detective with the state and then doing her side jobs under her little vampire guy, it seems like she has a lot of freedom, like a lot more than normally you'd expect. Especially like, okay, if she is the best investigator, you still have to like question something that she does, and everybody she works with pretty much goes with what she wants to do. So that part felt a little putting the main character on a pedestal kind of thing. So I did question that sometimes. I'd say for the most part it was understandable, but it did stick out as kind of a trope of, main character is so great, let's follow them and do all that. So let's jump into the world building, because I'm kind of connecting all of these parts that I usually separate. But she is part of this investigation bureau, which means the paranormal activity is known about in this universe. There's more investigation bureaus. It's not just the place that she lives. Witches, warlock, vampires, werewolves, all of these are known, and there are like certain laws to keep them under control and to live with them. So that was interesting itself. Not that it's like, oh, it's a secret underground and hush hush. Like, obviously they don't tell the regular cops everything, but there are literally like people on the detective team who recognize certain runes and are told to, like, hey, if you see this binding spell, like, don't touch it and all that. So I thought that was actually pretty interesting, since a lot of times you don't see that cohesion between the two different worlds. Another thing I thought was cool was the idea of sticky magic, where someone else's magic, like if they have bad magic, could rub off on you if you like came in contact with it, or if you performed a certain spell. I thought that was kind of interesting, but we spent a lot of time with the main character's impulsive causing trouble, almost losing her magic. A lot of things that could have been avoided if the main character didn't try to be a lone wolf, but at the same time, everybody was putting so much responsibility onto the MC. You're the only one who can do this job. You're the only one who can take care of this person. You're the only one we trust to do this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, y'all have to have more than one detective. I don't care if that's her case. There has to be some way you can divide this work up, because between everything she does as well, it was very main character centric, which I guess is common. Again, I don't read this genre as much, but it just felt very, why does everybody hold this main character up so high? It definitely seems like the author has bigger plans going through the series with the world building and expanding on several of these things, but we did get a lot in this first book. And like I said, she did write it well, where you weren't just getting huge info dumps just because, but they were spaced out and it felt appropriate to what we were talking about. So I did like the way that she wrote those. And to slide into the whole like writing portion of it, overall I thought it was super clean, easy to read, like I said, fast pacing. The few things that bugged me were this is written in first person past tense, so thank God the tense was the same that I write. With it being first person, there were several paragraphs where the character was like, going through daily motions, doing actions, whatever, and it was I da 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 da, I da 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 da, I, and it was like 3 or 4 sentences in a row of, starting with I went to the bathroom and closed the door, and I washed my hair and I brushed my teeth, and it was just like, could have gave me a little more sentence variance there, because those just felt like a broken record, even if it was different steps. Having it going I blah blah blah, I blah blah blah, not a fan. And then the other kind of writing point, that there were a couple typos, like where a space was missing. I don't think I saw too many like spelling errors, but there were a couple spots where it seemed like a space had been taken away and 2 words got smushed together. And there were definitely a few phrases that I thought were not great examples of showing. Twice, I think it was in the same chapter, the character used the phrase like in a horror movie or like in a horror show, and I think they were pulling up and the sign was like no trespassing sign was all dingy and their headlights were shining on it, and she said it looked like something out of a horror movie. I think your description was good enough without saying it looked like something out of a horror movie, because you're trying to instill some sort of terror or fear or anxiety when horror movies are different for a lot of people. I don't watch them because I know I will not forget them. I don't think it's a good descriptor. And she did use it again. Can't remember if it was when she walked on a scene or if they had found something and it said reminded her of a horror movie. And I was like, that doesn't mean anything to me, because I don't read or watch horror stuff to connect that, and it's such a broad term. So I thought that choice of phrasing was poor. And then there was a lot of, again, it was multiple times in a chapter where it really stuck out to me. And the characters, you'd say, luckily for me, the car showed up, or luckily for me, I was on the right path, or something, luckily for me. And it was like that exact phrase, maybe 4 times, very close proximity, and a few times later. But I was like, yes, it is luckily for you. Now that you say that, this is a little bit contrived, isn't it? You lucky girl. all of this is working out in your favor. Though again, you can't see that because you're not at the end, but luckily for you. So I was like, one or two times you're not really gonna think about like, luckily for me, I had the exact change. Like, that's not a huge thing. That's great. But to have like certain things in the plot happening and just to repeat certain terms where now I've thought about it, it made me question and like pause in my reading, which it should, anything that interrupts your reading experience is probably something we need to look at. In this case, it wasn't in favor. It was, yes, why are you lucky? I feel like things are working out for you. So I digress. Overall, like I said, I really enjoyed this story. It's at least a 4-star for me. The only things that really knocked it down, usually when it's a writing thing, it doesn't knock it down for me unless it's very, very bad and it needs a lot of editing to the point where it's difficult to read. But it was more of just some of the character tropes and the whole like worshiping the MC kind of thing that I was not too excited about. But with the flow of the story and the strings that we have left to go into the future books, I do have a few ideas of like who the love interest is gonna be and what sort of like plot and drama is gonna happen. Like, I know, but she wrote this mystery and all of these interwoven pieces very well that I want to see what she does for her next case. Like, I want to see her write some more cases. I do enjoy mystery. This was great, and I would say instead of like paranormal romance, paranormal mystery, I don't think it was quite enough of a thriller for me. Definitely just had a good mystery in it, and I enjoyed it. So if you guys like mystery, and if you like paranormal stuff with witches and werewolves and vampires, and if you like reading this genre in general, definitely check out No More Black Magic by A.L. Kessler, because I think you might find a new favorite. I did not expect to enjoy it as much, but I did. Again, I will try to continue this series, not this year, going into next year, and try to review it as a whole again. So look forward to that. And if there's an indie book that you would like me to read and review, comment below. It can be something that you've written or something a friend or just something that you've read that you like to get out there, because the whole idea of these is try to promote a little bit but also kind of analyze it and we can learn something. That is all for today. I'll see you guys in my next review.